Hello, everyone. This is Eric Pennington, and welcome to the Spirit of EQ podcast. We're glad that you've tuned in. A few things we wanted to tell you at the beginning of the show, and that's this podcast was created to be a tool to help you, primarily to discover and grow your EQ. Science and our own lived experiences confirm that the better we are at managing our emotions, the better we're going to be at making decisions, which leads to a better life. And that's something we all want. We're glad that you've taken out the time today to listen and hope that something that you hear will lead to a breakthrough. Hey, one last thing. We'd really appreciate a review on whichever platform you use to listen. And if you want to, leave some comments about what you heard today, as well as follow and subscribe. That way you won't miss a single episode as we continue this journey. And with that, the show begins. Welcome, everyone, to the Spirit of EQ podcast. I'm Eric Pennington, and with me, as always, is Jeff East. Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Hi, Eric. I forgot your name almost.
I was going to say it's a new year. You're allowed a little bit of
You're
slack.
Eric. I'm Jeff. Okay.
That's right. You got it. You got it. So, Jeff, today I'm going to go back down memory lane with you for a little bit, and way back. Maybe 6-7 years ago.
You're going to make me cringe.
Oh, but it's good for you. It's good for you. So I don't know if you remember. I think you do. When we first started the podcast, we had, I think it was just like a default idea. Hey, we should do this, right?
Right.
And we went through all of the 8 competencies of the EQ model we use, right?
Correct.
And I remember we were talking about this sometime last year, and you had just blurted out the comment like, it was cringeworthy, and I hope nobody listens to those old episodes. And then I remember you went to, hey, I think we should revisit that again. And at first I'm going, yeah, you're right, because, there's new clients, there's updates and changes and all the rest. Our experience and all the rest. But then you kept pressing on that. And then all of a sudden I started thinking, I think Jeff really does want those old episodes to be in the, somewhere in a vault somewhere, not to be listened to. But I know that wasn't what you were intending. I knew you wanted to do this again. So this is the beginning of a series of episodes, and it's going to be a little different. And when I say episodes, we're going to kind of do some micro episodes for those out there whom we work with who need to know specifically about one or the other. Competencies, as I should say, and then this will be contained inside of one as a whole as well. So with all that confusion, why don't we dig in?
Let's do that.
Are you ready? Okay. So the first competency...
Well, why don't we explain what a competency is in our model?
All right, Jeff, that's your cue.
Okay.
Explain what a competency is in our model.
With the EQ model that we use and the assessment tools we use, when you take the assessment, the full assessment called the SAY, you'll get results in 8 competencies.
Right.
That show where you are individually and kind of where you compare to, the world at large.
Broader universe.
So those competencies are just the tools, the nuts and bolts of the EQ model that we use.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's great. I appreciate that. So the first one in the model is enhance emotional literacy. And I'm going to go ahead and just quote the definition as it relates to that report you were talking about. Accurately identifying and interpreting both simple and compound feelings. So let's talk about that.
All right.
That's a mouthful, isn't it?
Yes.
So when you think about that, Jeff, I think of the word literacy, and literacy meaning I know not only how to read, but I understand what I'm reading.
Right. And to me also literacy is expressing it too.
Okay.
Being able to express an idea too.
Okay. So give me an example of what that might be.
Expressing an idea?
Yeah.
Unless just in the context of emotions, to be able to recognize an emotion, I'm feeling afraid, and being able to express that either to yourself or to someone else with an understanding of where that came from. Okay,
so would that be an example of I'm afraid? And the reason, Jeff, I'm afraid is I've seen this before, and it typically doesn't go well.
Yeah, exactly. There's something in that lizard brain, whatever you want to call it, that is
Right.
giving you information, and being able to take that and say, okay, there's something I need to be aware of. Now that I've expressed that there's something aware of, now I need to be able to identify it.
Identify it. Okay. All right. So when we think about the idea of literacy, to me, it kind of also implies that it's something that you can grow in, meaning I can learn, because I think if you ask the vast majority of people, name, the most common emotions, I think people would probably say happy, mad, sad.
Right.
Right. Or something to that effect. Right. But we know that there are a whole lot more than that. And they have nuance to them too. So give me some thoughts around what it means to learn more, or if somebody said, hey, I want to learn what are the different emotions.
Okay, well, first let's take it back one step a little bit.
Okay.
When you're first learning to read, see Jane run.
Yep.
Okay, there's information there.
Yep.
But as you get older, see how Jane is running because someone is chasing her. Still, you're seeing Jane run, but now there's more information in that sentence. And that's the way it is with emotions. If you're afraid, being able to flesh that out. Afraid is not just afraid.
Right.
There is worry can be part of afraid, discomfort, being a little fearful, to terror.
Right. It has different levels.
And all emotions are that way. There's just not one level of an emotion.
So would it be healthy also to understand the dynamic of that level thing again? Because I know that we've talked about it in other settings about the intensity of the chemicals, hormones, and peptides that are released when we feel an emotion, right?
Right.
And I should say I have found it helpful to understand that there's something different from being apprehensive to being fearful, right?
Right.
Because if you're apprehensive, the intensity of those chemicals, hormones, and peptides are not going to be the same if you are fearful or if you're terrified.
Correct.
Right? So is there power in knowing more about emotions?
Yeah. We'll stay with the afraid one. If you can recognize being apprehensive about something and you act upon that, you take a look around you, you examine what's happening around you, what's happening in your life.
Right.
You quite possibly can take care of that issue now so you don't get to that being fearful or that terror.
Yeah.
Because you can correct it. You can take steps to not get to that next level. If you're terrified, you're paralyzed too. You're
oftentimes, right?
Yeah, you're stuck there. And that's where you're going to, there is something that is going to harm you, whether it's physically harm, emotionally harm, your work harm, anything. So being able to recognize that before these other levels happen is going to be very beneficial to you.
So that does imply that we do have some level of control over our emotions, right?
Yeah, because to me, being able to control my emotions means that I recognize whatever the situation is and then take the appropriate response, not react, but respond.
Right.
And we need to remember, like the afraid emotion, everybody considers that a bad emotion, to be afraid. It's not. Anger is not. It's just giving you information.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the most common, I think, mischaracterizations of emotions, right, is that there are the good ones, the bad ones, the negative, the positive, and that's just not what they are.
They're neutral until you do something with them or don't do something with them.
Right. And therein lies the responsibility, right, in our actions and how we choose to either react or respond. And I know in our world, the idea is reacting typically as soon as you feel it, you do something or you say something. Responding, you have given yourself some time for all those chemical hormones and peptides to subside and allow your prefrontal, the executive function, to help you with the decision, right?
That 6-second pause we
Yeah,
talked
the
about
6-second
before.
pause. Yeah.
Just like your mom told you to count to 10.
Right.
But
exactly.
I wonder if she ever counted to 10 dealing with me.
Yeah. I would say rapid fire, right? So this idea also is connected to something that we'll have in the show notes, is that we have an online tool. It's an emotions wheel that is very interactive that can help you understand more. And would you recommend someone educating themselves, just sitting down and exploring the different emotions that are in that wheel, for example? You don't have to use the wheel, but I mean, just as a guide.
I think that's the first step. We're talking about literacy, and the way you become more literate is you do some study, you do some work. Like I said, that see Jane run.
Yeah.
To get to that next sentence, there's going to have to be some work put into it to either be able to understand it, or to be able to express it.
And that's probably important too, right, Jeff? Because the complexity of the world we live in, the more literate you are, the better you are going to be at navigating.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. So what if someone says to you, I hear you talking about that emotions are information, or, they communicate some message to me, right? What if it's associated with a bad memory? I mean, something traumatic. I mean, and I don't really want to go there. What do you say to that person? And as our audience knows, Jeff, we are not providing clinical advice.
No.
This is just your opinion of, and we can discuss that a little deeper, but what do you say to that person?
I think it's still important for them to explore that. Is there something going on around me that is this, the same kind of situation that this bad memory is coming? Is there some information being given to me that maybe the thinking part of my brain isn't processing yet, but this protective, this unthinking part of the brain is telling me, hey, this happened before, you better pay attention to this. So yes, I think it's important to go back. Now, don't beat yourself up about that bad memory,
right?
But just, once again, it's information. You're becoming more literate to that situation that you were in.
And therein lies the idea about curiosity, right?
Yes.
Being able to look at it without assigning some level of judgment to what happened, or on and on and on. And I would also say, if you're someone that says, it's great that you and Jeff can throw out that advice, but I just can't go there, maybe that's your sign that you should seek the help of a clinician that can help you as you are navigating it. And I have always believed that there's these levels. Obviously, we talked about the levels of intensity of certain emotions, but these levels of understanding what we need to do to move forward and grow. Yes, some people out there, Jeff, might be able to look at that emotions wheel and boom, they're just rocking and rolling. I can look at the bad memories, the good memories, it's no problem. Some people might take a little bit more time, and they may need the help of a coach or someone close to them that can give them guidance, right? And then there truly could be, hey, maybe there's some of those memories, some of those connections to those emotions that intellectually, right, that I need to tackle it, but I can't alone.
Right.
That's where I think it's important for clinical help.
Yes.
And by way of story, I can tell you, I had a recent conversation with my wife, and we were talking about some traumatic events that I had in my childhood. And I was telling her about how I was going back to that time, and how I could see the street. I knew what the weather was like. I knew I saw what I was doing. I remember my aunt coming and taking me to Pizza Hut for lunch, and I remember the conversation I had with her. And this was all happening within that traumatic time period. And my wife asked me, do you still feel X like you did? And I said, no. What I feel empathy for that boy. I see him, and I'm kind of looking at him through the lens of, it's okay. this is a tough time. This is a tough situation, but you're going to be fine. And I think, though I'm not trying to prescribe or project my thing onto our audience, Jeff, I've found that some of the most powerful things that emotional literacy has done for me is that I learned, and I'm still learning, I shouldn't run away from my emotions. None of them. No. Even the ones that I may prefer not to feel, versus the ones I like, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think, to your point earlier, they have information for me.
Exactly.
So I've kind of morphed maybe, or grown. Maybe my literacy has grown to the point of I don't really like angry. I don't like anger as an emotion, mm-hmm. Because I don't know I don't like how it makes me feel physically. I don't how it makes me interact with other people, right? But now I invite anger to sit down with me, and I can listen, and I don't have to judge. I don't have to well, if you were a better man or whatever, you could handle this. Or okay, it doesn't bother me. I denial. Now it's like, what is it that you have to say?
Right.
Because Jeff, for me, this comes from me.
Mm-hmm.
This information was intended for me. So the idea that I'm going to block it out or I'm going to run from it or the rest, and this is from a recovering running artist because I used to run, right? It is so much healthier for me now because I am able to. And I think that was a contributor to being able to pivot from how I felt when that trauma occurred to now being able to look and see that entire scene from a perspective of empathy. So any last thoughts?
Yeah, one more thought.
Yeah.
Another part of this emotional literacy that we haven't talked about is being able to recognize others' emotions. If I see that you're angry, I'm able to pick up on it and understand that you're angry about something. We have a pretty good relationship. Mm-hmm. If I can sense that you are angry, I could go, Eric, something's bothering you. Do you want to talk about it? Or Eric's angry, I probably want to go next door, depending on how your anger is.
I'm going to turn your approach upside down, Jeff.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to throw this out to the audience from the perspective of what you said is partially on mark.
Okay.
And this doesn't nullify the other part either.
Right.
Because this is all nuance, everyone out there. This is not, hey, we've decided this is it. But here's a perspective I'd like you to think about. I believe, and I may have this wrong, I believe it was Darwin was the one that kind of threw out the idea that the way that you can tell others' emotions is facial expressions, right? And I'm stealing a bit from Lisa Feldman Barrett, but there's this idea, and my wife is a wonderful example of this. And I didn't realize it until I heard a talk with Dr. Barrett, right? I'm going, she was talking about anger. And typically, what do we associate anger? Frown on the face, maybe a furrowed brow, right? Maybe sighing. There could be physical attributes, right?
Getting red-faced.
Okay, now there's a good one, right? You see someone and you can see the face is changing hues, right?
Right.
Okay. And then she said, that may be truly anger, but do you realize some people cry when they're angry?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, that's Eileen. I have had times in my life with her where she begins to tear up, and I did step on it, okay? Where I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Oh my God, are you okay? And then she would say, I'm fine. It's just what he said, what she did. Now, I'm going to throw out what I think is also a way that you can navigate that.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of me saying, Jeff, there seems like there's something wrong here. Maybe I turn it to, Jeff, I don't want to presume anything.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, I don't want to assume anything, but I get a sense, I feel like you might be a little angry. Am I close? Am I right? Jeff, what are you probably going to say to me? It either is, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's going to be, no. This is when I get angry, you fill in the blank, because you give the person the opportunity to make sure, because I have had times in my life where I've had people who they haven't done what you did. Okay, you did it out of a care perspective. Like, Eric, I get a sense. I seems like something's wrong, but to go, oh, I already know what he's thinking, and then you move on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know what that is. Bye. It's judgment, right? So I'm throwing that out there again for you, for audience. It's not me saying that Jeff was wrong and this is the right way. It's to say there's some nuance that you can add to it.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
And when you do that, I think it furthers your own education. Because, Jeff, I got scars to show for how many times I misread my wife's facial expressions. So much so. Did you know my actual first name is Charles? Okay, so when I tell you that that's not, I've had times where I felt like Charlie Brown, Lucy, and okay, maybe I'm dating myself for the audience, but even if you even watched on Apple TV Plus the Charlie Brown Christmas and Thanksgiving, everyone can remember. Lucy says she's going to hold the ball for Charlie Brown, and Charlie Brown he forever goes and she pulls the ball just before he kicks it. So I've got scars to show when I've misunderstood. I'm saying this to say that's why it's so important to gather more information as you're educating yourself about others' feelings. Okay, Jeff. So now we're going to take a look at another competency called recognize patterns.
Okay.
I did not indicate this when we did the last one, and that all of these competencies are housed inside of life pursuits.
Right.
There's the know yourself, the choose yourself, and the give yourself. Right. Know yourself being,
you just know what's going on inside you.
Okay. And then we have the choose yourself.
You're deciding what you're going to do with what you know.
All right. And then there's the give yourself.
Now you're actually doing it.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So for recognized patterns, acknowledging frequently recurring reactions and behaviors.
Right.
This is one of my favorites, by the way. And I've used this example in sessions before where I'll say, think of the sports analogies, right? And maybe that's not the best way to put it, but I would say it's like your own personal game film. We talk about sports teams. A lot of them watch film, especially, I think, in football. But the idea is you watch film to see what your opponent does in typical situations, and you get to see your own and to kind of understand what your tendencies are. I think this is kind of the same thing. It's kind of looking at your own game film, maybe as a way of saying it.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about that then. Acknowledging frequently recurring reactions and behaviors.
Can I give an example?
You can do.
You have heard this before, so if you want to go get coffee or something.
Oh my gosh, you're going to give me a break.
And I've used this one before, but this is from my own life, and I laugh about this one every time.
Yep.
Growing up, both my parents were children of the Depression.
Yep.
So they didn't want for anything when they were growing up, but neither one of their families had stuff for extra, which is very common.
Right.
So they were very close with $1. Okay. Myself and my sisters growing up, we had everything we needed. We didn't always have what we wanted. And every year, when it was time to buy school clothes, okay, we always made the trip to do that. When it came to shoes, now I'm dating myself again. When I was growing up, the shoe to get was a Converse Chuck Taylor.
Which, by the way, those are very prominent now too.
Yes,
especially on the women's side of the equation.
Yes, they've made a comeback, but that was the Air Jordan of my childhood. That's what professional basketball players wore on the court.
Yeah.
All right. And they were probably $10 or $12. All right.
Yep.
But the Keds were $8. So every year I would lobby to get my Converse, and every year I'd come home with Keds. And that was just heartbreaking. So, about 6 or 7 years ago, I'm talking to my daughter, who, like you said, all Chuck Taylors are that. And she's been wearing Chuck Taylor since she was could buy her first pair of shoes.
Right.
And we were talking, and she said that she had to throw away finally her favorite pair because they just fell apart.
Yeah.
And I related that to, I always wanted to get those, I just never have. And then she said very calmly, he goes, Dad, you're an adult. You can buy your own.
Mm-hmm.
So from childhood, I had this pattern of I can't get Converse Chuck Taylors.
Mm-hmm.
And it took her pointing that out to go, I can. So I went out and bought a pair.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that to me is this recognizing patterns.
Well, there's also another facet of that I think is important because think about it if you're in the work environment and you find that there's a certain day of the week when your nervousness kicks in, when there's a certain nervousness you have.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's when you're supposed to give a presentation to a board or when you're supposed to have a one-on-one with an employee that for whatever reason.
Any kind of a deadline or anything.
Okay. But what you notice, or maybe you hadn't up until kind of gaining a bit more insight on this emotional intelligence thing, is that you always find yourself nervous and you feel a bit of anxiety, your throat gets dry, your mouth, and you're just like, okay, I just got to get through this.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize it's not healthy. You realize that you don't like feeling that way physically or otherwise. And I can't tell you how many people this idea resonates with because they just don't know. They haven't watched their own game film.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about it in previous episodes, and I think the one we did on emotional literacy, this idea that, okay, are you going to look at it through the lens of curiosity or judgment? Because if you're looking through the lens of judgment, you're going to find everything that you did wrong. You're going to find out what you shouldn't do. You're going to find out what you should do. And it's just going to be kind of like this equation that needs to be solved.
Mm-hmm.
I believe curiosity opens you up to kind of exploring, looking at it at different angles. Why do I get nervous? What's behind the nervousness?
Mm-hmm.
How did I get to this place where I think this way? To kind of unfold and kind of explore so that you might be able to find out the real source of the problem, right?
And, in your example, let's say that every Wednesday you have to present to somebody in the previous week or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And maybe the first time you did that, it was horribly bad.
Mm.
You've gotten better. You go in, you do it well, but that horribly bad first time doing it set the pattern for every week before you go in there.
Yeah.
And if you can go back and look at that and go, wow, I've learned how to do this. I do it well. And people are telling me how good I'm doing it. Why am I wasting all this emotional energy fretting about it? I don't need to do that anymore. But
I think it comes back to what you were saying earlier about with the Chuck Taylors.
Uh-huh.
If you've established that there's this, quote, story that is true in your head, you'll hold on to it.
Right. And that's what you're doing. You're holding on to that first bad time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or at least your first perceived bad time.
Right. And this, for everyone out there, it is, again, this is nuance, right? Because it might go the way you just described, Jeff. It might be one of those things where, well, the reason I get nervous is because 30 years ago, I had a professor that said, you should never be speaking publicly. You're just not good at it.
Right.
And I believed him. And once again, not saying that it always runs this way, but when you believe something and then that establishes some concrete to the story, and then that starts the neural pathway, and then all of a sudden, that's reality for you.
Right.
Right? So when you think about these recurring things, there's got to be an objective. So if I say to you, Jeff, I see it. What's my objective? Do you think? Where do I want to take it for growth and breakthrough?
You mean if I'm the one that's Once again, go back and examine it. Look at what is actually happening.
Yeah.
Around this.
Yep.
And you're in this meeting with me. I might want to go, Eric, how am I doing with these presentations? I'm just nervous. I can't sleep the night before.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have something in this specific thing that I really need to improve?
That's an awesome example, because if we're not careful, when someone comes to us with that kind of vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
as I would be tempted to do, Jeff, we've done over 100 episodes. What do you mean you're kind of concerned about your presentation? You're doing great. You know this. Come on, we got to keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, maybe I should start with, what makes you feel that way?
Right.
What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel like you're not hitting the mark?
Right.
Because it may be that you're actually looking for something to try to address it.
Mm-hmm.
But Jeff, I think some people, if they get the flippant, you're doing fine. Well, this is crazy. You don't need to think about that. That kind of nullifies your observation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we blow right past that kind of thing. We don't realize that the question that's asked may not necessarily be the answer that they're looking for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm gonna you flipped something on me a little bit ago. I'm gonna flip something on you.
Ooh, I'm ready, I think.
I just saw you doing presentation,
Mm-hmm.
and you did the best presentation I've ever seen.
Right.
And I come up to you and go, Eric, that was the best presentation. I learned so much from that. And you go, oh, it was nothing. What kind of a pattern is that?
I would say that is diminishing and maybe, what's the word I'm looking for when you want to push away?
Right.
It's not deferred. It's
well, I think
deflect.
Deflect.
I want to deflect that compliment because I might have in my head what a parent said to me 40 years ago, that you're not really that good. You're deficient. You're less than.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all of those examples, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we can point to some authority figure in our past that might have said you're less than, right? So when I hear a compliment, your compliment contradicts the story that I have in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying this from experience, by the way, because I dealt with imposter syndrome for many, many years. This idea, yeah, you said that, but that's not true, because the story in my head says I'm kind of a fake. Do you see where I'm going?
Yeah, and that's another pattern.
Exactly. So I don't want to overwhelm our audience and make them think, oh my gosh, I'm in a maze, and how do I get out of here, right? So let's talk about from a solution perspective.
Okay.
In the recognizing patterns. I believe that when we see something, right? When we see something that is not as it should be, and maybe you use the house example in your house, right? You notice that this is a recent one for me. The outlets in my house, and I think in most houses, there's a little screw in the center that keeps it there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've noticed over time that those get loose, and at times now, when I put a plug into that jack, I'll see that plate kind of move. I can ignore it,
Mm-hmm.
and it probably is. It's not going to cause a fire. It's not going to be the end of the world. But I noticed it. Well, I was going to say, yes, it could have some damage, potential damage. But my point is, Jeff, it's whether or not I'm going to address it. And you would say to me, how do I address a loose plate on an outlet? Eric, go get a screwdriver, typically flathead, and just gently, don't over tighten, just gently tighten
it up.
That's kind of what I think is here. I mean, does that resonate with you? Or
Step one is recognizing the pattern. Step two is this pattern getting me what I want? Is the result or the response from this pattern the response I want?
Yep.
And then three, getting the screwdriver out and tightening it up.
Right. And realizing that some issues might require something more than a screwdriver and a slight turn, right?
Exactly.
And that kind of comes back to our previous episode about emotional literacy. If you find that it's something that you cannot manage on your own, you should get help. And wherever that help may be, clinical or otherwise. So that about covers it for recognized patterns. And anything else on recognized patterns that maybe we haven't touched on?
And just once again, these are not all internal. Recognizing patterns in other people.
Yeah.
If you know someone that you're a supervisor and you know someone that if there is going to be a huge big project that's going to be announced or is going to start on Monday, that if you tell them on Friday you're going to ruin their weekend, you've recognized a pattern in somebody else. Why ruin their weekend?
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody else that you're working with, they want to know on Friday so they can get themselves ready to do it.
Yeah.
So just being able to recognize patterns in other people. Now, there is one caution with that. You can weaponize that.
Yes. Yes.
It's called pushing buttons.
Yeah.
Anybody that's been married as long as my wife and I have, we have a whole keyboard of buttons we can push if we want to, but recognizing that and not doing it.
Yeah. And I would also add to that, maybe as the last thing, do not assume that you know what's behind something until you ask the person. Mm-hmm. That is absolutely, to me, a key. So now, Jeff, we are in the next competency, which is housed inside of a new life pursuit called Choose Yourself, which really is kind of cool how that flows, because we talked about recognizing patterns. And once you recognize the patterns, it does imply that you got to choose what you're going to do next.
Exactly.
Right? So the first competency in the Choose Yourself life pursuit is apply consequential thinking. And that one is evaluating the cost and benefits of your choices. So let's talk a little bit about that. And sometimes I've encountered people who think that that has something to do with your intelligence level, is how well you do at applying consequential thinking. It's not really connected to how intelligent you are, though, right?
No, I don't think so, because these consequences, small consequences, up to humongous consequences, and that doesn't, to me, have anything to do with your intelligence. It has to do with situations you're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think in many respects, too, it has a lot more to do with your willingness. And I say it that way, willingness to slow down or not slow down, because the competency does imply that you're slowing down enough to weigh something, right? Now, I know there's this broad spectrum, right? There are those who go into analysis paralysis, right? They find that they can't make a decision because they're just weighing back and forth, right? Then full swing out onto the other extreme where someone just says, I know what I need to do and I go do it. I know a lot of that can be personality driven, but somewhere in the middle there maybe is that balance of, okay, I'm slowing down enough intentionally to weigh what's the cost, what's the benefit of this particular choice that I have in front of me that I'm about to make, right? The idea here is what I have noticed, and I don't have any science around this, but I notice entrepreneurs can tend to have lower consequential thinking. What do you think about that? What may be behind that? I have some ideas, but I'd love to get your insight.
That's a tough question. Because I've thought about that too.
And this does not mean there could be other types of roles in life and in work that are different. And if it's okay with you, I'll jump to a conclusion, right? That I've kind of come away with. Again, anecdotal at best. And that is that they tend to be a group where they really have a focus on what they think is the thing to do. And when they see it, it's go, right? I think those that are 8s on the Enneagram are very much this way, right? One of them being one of our business partners and my son. There's not a lot of wiggle with my son. My son is like, hey, I see it, I do it. I'm right, you're wrong. There's no more need to talk about it. Now, once again, here's the downside of if you're low in consequential thinking, right? If we go into this mode of, you're wrong, Jeff, and I'm right, end of story, I'm probably operating on very limited data.
Right. You're not using the resources that you have.
So what happens then? if I don't slow down and apply some consequential thinking in a relationship perspective.
First thing that popped in my head is, I told you so. So you're going to have to suffer that.
Right.
What I've noticed with people that are these entrepreneurial types that make these quick decisions, if they become interested in personal growth, they learn to temper this. They understand that I don't always take into account everything around me, including the other people. And this curiosity, recognizing their patterns that we just talked about, that they start reining it in a little bit. I don't think it's good for them to try to get rid of it, because this is a basic part of who they are.
Yes.
But they start to use it differently, and then they do, Eric, I've got this great idea, and we're doing this, this, and this, and I just already signed the contract, and blah, 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 instead of going, Eric, what do you think about this? And then understanding that what Eric might be telling me is not about how bad I am.
Yeah, confusing the value of you as a person versus...
No, he's looking at the situation.
Yeah. And I think one of the values that I have found just from personal experience is that idea about timing, because so much of it is, I believe, when I think about relationships and I think about business, is the idea that you're kind of doing a surveying thing. I think there's this constant flow of consequential thinking, cost benefit, right? And it's very clear to me, some of my worst decisions came when I allowed myself to just go with what I wanted, right? I really want this to happen. I really need this to happen. And I'm going because I just wanted it to be.
Right.
Versus maybe taking a step back and kind of weighing, okay, if you continue down this path and you burn a relationship, even if you do get what you think you want, you'll burn that relationship, and you'll either, one, maybe not be able to repair it, or two, it's going to be a very difficult journey to repair it. So think about that as a double indemnity, if I can say it that way.
There's another thing about the relationship part, and this is more than internal consequences.
Right.
Let's say you and I, we've been friends forever, and you go down a path that is harmful to me.
Yep.
And I have to make a decision. And the consequence is either, calling you on it, and the consequences could be lose our friendship. The consequences could be I don't say anything and it ends up hurting me. So sometimes you have to make these consequential decisions personally. This person is damaging me. And I need to break that relationship, and there's going to be consequences from that.
Yeah.
So I think we need to look at it in a lot deeper way sometimes.
Yeah, because I think that in the end, if we don't allow ourselves that consequential thinking to truly weigh the cost and benefit, we sort of disconnect our ability to see out onto the horizon long term. Because when you're right in the midst of it and you're recalling all of the fond memories and all of the, I don't want to hurt the person, and that's all immediate, but you're not allowing yourself the opportunity to look up and go over the horizon. If this person's behavior continues long term, it's not only going to do damage to them, but it's also going to mean damage to me, and maybe by extension, those who I'm connected to.
Exactly.
And on, right? And I will tell you, because I have very, very personal experience with this one, and it is hard work. I pull no punches about that. It's really, really hard, especially when we're talking about family.
Exactly. And I totally understand too.
And the reality is, and I would love to tell everyone out there that there's this wonderful Hollywood ending where, in the end, I can't remember that movie now. I got Jimmy Stewart in my head. It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, okay.
All right. As one example of the Hollywood ending, right? Sometimes it doesn't go that way. Sometimes you, I think, have to look at it through the lens of, okay, was I able to prevent, or maybe a better way to say it, when I look at the results, did this person, this situation, was it protected from the damage that particular relationship was bringing? And maybe the only thing you're going to walk away from it is they were protected, and that was the win.
Exactly.
Still sad story, still a sad ending.
Well,
but
and you were protected too.
Yeah, in the end.
Yeah.
In the end, absolutely. Because you did not allow for yourself to be harmed. Because again, the whole, as you brought it up, it's kind of that, wait a minute, stop. But Jeff, I'm just thinking about this. I can't imagine what you would do if you didn't apply any consequential thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would seem to me that you would be at the mercy of wherever that particular dynamic took you.
Yeah.
And most people that I know who are in that place, that's a recipe for regret.
And it's just not necessarily a personal thing. It could be a job situation.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
This
that's
job is killing me.
Yeah. You want to talk about one that is, I think, maybe even more dangerous is because, and I was having this conversation earlier today, the idea that, how many times have you heard, well, I have to, Jeff, because, I've got a mortgage. I have to, Jeff, because I've got 2 kids in college. I have to, Jeff, because if I don't, my wife doesn't work. Where we pull out all these things, all the while the organization that you're working for is treating you so poorly, and your physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health is deteriorating.
Those have to things give you a heart attack.
Right. And then you do wake up one day and the game is over, at least that particular game, the one called corporate work, whatever you want to use as your descriptor. And then what do you have? There is no switching like a light switch to, now it's where I'm going to live the life that I need to live. I'm going to pay attention to my health. I'm going to pay attention to my emotion. Life doesn't live that way.
Wow.
But that's a great one. So I think we've pretty much covered all of that we wanted to about consequential thinking. Anything last thoughts on that one?
No, I think we did a pretty good job on that.
Cool. Jeff, as we keep moving through the competencies, I didn't mention that there are 2 competencies for the know yourself. There's 4 competencies for the choose yourself, which is where we're at now.
Right.
And then there's 2 competencies for the give yourself. Let's look at navigate emotions. Assessing, harnessing, and transforming emotions as a strategic resource. This one is typically gets, from my experience, gets probably the most attention from people. From the perspective of they understand that sometimes their emotions can kind of push them around, or their perspective is that they're being pushed around, or that they're flat-footed and they don't know what to do with it. So with navigate emotions, what do you think about this idea that making it a strategic resource?
Well, first, I think there's a concept that seems to be always used when we talk about navigating emotion. We talk about like a GPS that get us from one place to the other.
Yep.
And the very thing first that a GPS has to know before it can get you somewhere is where it is. And to be able to navigate emotions, you need to know where you are navigating emotions. So that's why you go back to the very first one we talked about.
Yep.
Is start off by understanding what your emotions are about this.
Yeah.
So once you do that, then you can start this navigation process and you can use it strategically, which to me, when you talk about strategy, that's not navigating my emotions on the way home tonight, but navigating my emotions through a relationship or through a new job or through a loss that you've had. It's a big thing. It's not just minute to minute. It can be,
Yeah.
and that does happen with this. But to me, it's looking at more of the big things that are happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have found that the connection to enhanced emotional literacy is powerful here, because I've found personally that the more that I know about the meaning and the intent and the message that my emotions are delivering to me, it increases it increases my ability to navigate as I'm feeling it, right? And I'm one, and I've mentioned this in previous, I'm one that I typically associate anger as one that I don't like, right? And what I have found, though, is that now, because I know what anger means, I have some literacy around it. I am positioned to, when I encounter it, to use it strategically, because it's no longer this foreigner or this thing that I don't understand. It's now I'm pretty familiar with it, and my sensations around it are not as overwhelming as they were maybe 10 years ago, right? So I think in many ways, when I think about navigate emotions, it really does mean you're getting to a point where you have a practice of, when I feel this emotion, I have something in me now that I can use this strategically, again, versus it leaving me flat-footed or overwhelming me or pushing me around. You know what I mean?
Right. You just develop practices. You become familiar with it.
And I think that's really one of the core things about emotional intelligence in general, is the idea that you're building a practice of this. It's really not an information gathering thing. It's not, hey, I'm going to get educated, pass the test, and then get a degree. No. This is an ongoing, this is what I do. And I used this example in a session a week or so ago about, I have a practice of how I exercise and how I eat. And, I'm going through this gyration with this group, and it was like, as I'm telling them this, I'm going, yeah, this is a practice, right? It's like, I know what I do on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I know what I do on Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday. I know when I eat, and I know when I don't eat. And it's now a part of what I do. So if someone says to me, okay, it's breakfast, what are you going to do? I'd be like, what do you mean? What am I going to do? It's Monday. And Monday, I usually have done this exercise-wise, so I typically eat this type of food. I don't think about it anymore.
And when we talk about emotions, it's not always going to work, but you recognize, how do I act when I get angry?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I yell at everybody and throw things. That's not a good way to handle anger. So you figure out how for you is the best way to navigate emotions. It might be, when I get really angry, I need to go take a walk.
Yeah.
Or whatever. I just need to go in a quiet room and meditate for a minute, or whatever it is. You learn how you can navigate this emotion. And that's the practice, is being able to recognize the emotion, recognizing we're going back, recognizing the pattern that you have, understanding the consequences, and then navigating it.
Well, and I think that that's a good strategy. And I think that's kind of within the definition about it being using emotions as a strategic resource, is being very strategic with it. And did you notice, Jeff, that we didn't say get rid of anger or deny anger or find a way to stop anger?
Anger is just telling you something.
There you go. There you go. All right. I think that covers us for Navigate Emotions.
All right.
Next up, Jeff, in the Choose Yourself Life Pursuit is the competency of engage intrinsic motivation. This one is gaining energy from personal values and commitments versus being driven by external forces. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay. I think right now in today's world, we are getting bombarded with things that are trying to extrinsically motivate us.
Those external forces.
Those external forces.
Yeah.
if you watch a football game, Ford, Chevy, and Dodge are trying to get you to buy a pickup truck. And Bud Light and Budweiser and Miller are trying to get you to buy beer.
Yep.
So you get those,
Those are just two out of what seems like thousands.
Of thousands. That's just watching I just want to sit down and I want to watch a football game.
Not so fast, my friend.
I'm not interested in buying a truck.
Yep.
But they're trying to get me to that. So you've got those extrinsic things.
Yep.
Social media is an extrinsic motivation. People are trying to get you to think the way they think you should think. Is that a good sentence? There's a lot of
I'll
things
take
in there.
it.
Okay.
I'll take it.
They're trying to get you to come to their side. So you've got that kind of extrinsic motivation. There's all these things that are trying to get you to do what they want you to do.
And when you think about it from a time perspective and your ability to carve out thought and time of reflection and curiosity, right? Which more and more I'm thinking has totally been, it's disappeared from our cultural norm. So we're a bit revolutionary, Jeff, if I may say so.
Okay.
And I would recommend those out there join us in the revolution of bringing on more curiosity and reflection. Because if you're bombarded like that, and if you're paying attention to those things, it'd be very hard for you, right, to establish what are your personal values and commitments.
Exactly.
How do you know that a new Ford truck is not what you need? I mean, you've got to have some sense of what's of value and commitments, right? It also applies to, you mentioned social media. You've got to be able to, in my mind, to be able to be reflective enough to go, I think that's wonderful that you just got promoted and you're now the fill in the blank. But that's not the path I'm on.
Right.
I can congratulate you and be happy for you, but then it stops because I have my journey that I'm on. But Jeff, if you haven't established what that is, I could see it being easy to sway you into, well, if so-and-so got promoted, you need to work on getting promoted. If so-and-so bought the Ford truck and anybody buys a Ford truck, you can kind of be swayed.
I'm going to say a statement, and I apologize in advance.
Ooh, an apology in advance. So, do we need the censors on right now?
You might need to do a bleep. This is something my mom and dad would say. You're like a fart in a whirlwind.
I've heard that one before. Yeah.
And I think that's if you're letting these other things motivate you, that's what you are. You're just going where the wind is blowing. Yeah. And there's one thing that I think that there's a reward for the intrinsic motivation that maybe is not so outlined in that definition, but it does, I think, it increases the chances that you're going to choose happiness. Because you'll begin to, or you may be on a path of where you're no longer looking to the external to deliver what can only be delivered from the internal. Whatever those rewards, whether it's the chemical rewards from being fulfilled or, I don't need a new pickup truck because the one I have fulfills all my needs and it's paid for. And look at that rather than going, I have the biggest, newest thing. What I have is perfectly fine and it's not costing me anything.
And there's no judgment here. If it makes sense to you and it fits within your definition of what you want and you feel like, hey, a new truck is the way to go, then by all means.
Yeah, the old one, all the wheels fell off. It looked like
Jeff, I say it this way because, and I know you well enough that my gut says you're going to get this. Our job at Spirit of EQ is not to tell you how to live your life.
No.
We're here to supply you with information and tools that you might use to make for a better life, as defined by you, not us. But one thing I can tell you, if you're making that decision on the truck or you're making that decision on working on getting promoted based on the fact that this external world says you should, I'd say you're increasing the chances you're going to end up with some regret.
Right. Like the truck example. Intrinsically, I look at the truck and it's falling apart, and I need that for my job.
Yeah.
I need that for what I do. It could be I need that because of my hobbies, the things that are very important to me. I'm intrinsically motivated, and I need that truck. So then you pay attention to the ads on football games.
Yeah. And I would tell you this as a bit of an add to that. And it's the old saying, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. And I think that kind of goes to aligning that intrinsic motivation with your own personal values and commitments. All right. So anything else on intrinsic motivation?
No, I think we covered that.
All right. Perfect. Okay, Jeff, we are now at the last of the 4 for the Choose Yourself life pursuit, and that's exercise optimism.
And I am sure you're going to do a good job with this.
I don't know. I've got a different take on this that you may or may not be.
Okay, you just dampened my optimism.
All right, so that was good. Positive, let's see, taking a proactive perspective of hope and possibility. A proactive perspective of hope and possibility. So let me tell you about a group that we were working with that, and it seemed that it was heavily weighted with engineers and a blend, right? Technology and otherwise. Mm-hmm. And a few of them in the debrief of their report really were kind of a little, maybe bummed is the right word, that their exercise optimism score was lower, right? Mm-hmm. And one of them just was kind of waxing out loud about, well, I don't know, I try to be optimistic, but I'm kind of quiet, and I know I'm an introvert, and he was just going through this litany, and I said, what would you say if I told you that optimism isn't just being cheery and smiley and happy all the time? I think I got his attention. And I said, okay, what happens in your world when you see a problem? Do you identify it? Do you raise your hand? Do you note it? I mean, I would think in your world of engineering, that's kind of essential. You're not. Mm-hmm. You're looking for, well, what was wrong? Hello, Boeing, wherever you are. I couldn't resist. No insults to Boeing. No judging of Boeing. But here's where I'm going. And I said, my gut is, as an engineer, probably when you identify the problem, you probably go to work on how to fix it. What are some solutions? How can we improve it? Fill in the blank. And it's just like it was watching somebody bloom like a flower. Because all of a sudden they were going, well, I am optimistic, right?
I have the skills and the knowledge and the capability to fix this.
And that is optimism.
Exactly.
It is probably, it's not the only way optimism is exhibited, but I think it's one of the most powerful, because it's, hey, I got to raise my hand. There's a problem. However, what if we did 1, 2, 3 different ways to help fix that problem? Versus it being this someone who's just saying, everything's great, everything's wonderful, we're going to be fine, we're the greatest, we're the best, don't worry, it's okay, which is vague in my mind. And again, that has elements of optimism, no doubt. But that one really struck me, is that optimism can be exhibited in a powerful way in that form as well.
Yeah, it's the idea of, for me, to be optimistic about something, especially something that is my thing, whatever it happens to be, is to recognize your strengths and your capabilities and your weaknesses. You have to add those in there too.
Yeah.
But recognize that you have what it takes. And it could be the work thing, it could be a relationship thing, it could be anything that you're dealing with that if I am realistically looking at this situation. And the reason I say that is there's a downside to optimism, and that's becoming a cheerleader. I've used this example before. You've got a football game and your team is behind 28-0 and there's 2 minutes left.
Right.
And you've got the cheerleaders on the sideline doing their cheers. Everybody in that stadium, everybody may be watching it on TV, know you're going to lose. And those cheerleaders at that point to me kind of seem silly. Mm-hmm. Now, let's take that into a work situation. You're a manager and your team has just been giving this horrifically difficult project. It could be you're having to develop new methods. It mm-hmm. could be the time constraint. It could be budget. Mm-hmm. If you just go to your team and just be a cheerleader like those cheerleaders when you're 28-0, your team, everybody in that room knows this is going to be tough. Yeah. But the optimistic person would come out and recognize, okay, team, we, are going to have to put in a lot of overtime and we're going to have to come up with some new ways to do this. But I know we have the team to be able to do that. That's realistically optimism that is going to help your team.
Yeah, and I think that there's some, depending on the culture in which you're operating as a manager or leader, and that's important because, if you don't have the kind of culture that can handle those tough kind of conversations, mm-hmm. It can be pretty thorny. But I do believe that there's odds are high. We're not gonna hit the mark here. Yeah. But here's what I think can happen. I think we'll grow. I think we will learn new ways of doing things in the future. I think we'll find ways to work better as a team. And okay, you know what? Maybe there's going to be something that we never expected that's going to deliver it for us. But to go into it and say, I know it's going to happen. We just need to, we need to put our heads to the grind and blah, 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 blah. Most of the people that work for you are smart enough to understand what's realistic and what's not.
I just watched a YouTube video. It's about 20 minutes long, but it was about the development of the Thor missile. And going into that, they took you from the very beginning all the way through. They knew there was a good chance the first one's going to blow up.
Yeah.
But until we blow that first one up, we're not going to know what needs to be fixed. And they were optimistic all the way through the project. And like you're saying, things are going to blow up. But I'm optimistic that failure, that setback is going to give us knowledge and practice and information to try it again to make it better and better and better.
And Jeff, I will be the first to tell you that I don't like making mistakes.
Nobody does.
But the reality is I'm going to make a lot, mm-hmm. and I'm going to make them each day. And the key is, what am I learning from them, right? And I think another part of our cultural, what I call it, dysfunction, is that we've got people convinced that the game is about how can you get through a day without making mistakes. Whoever makes the least amount of mistakes wins. And the reality of that, and I get it, if we're talking about the NFL and it's the Super Bowl and it's the fourth quarter with mm-hmm. a minute left, I understand that kind of equation. Mm-hmm. But I'm talking about life.
Yeah, and I firmly believe that the companies and individuals that allow and actually embrace these mistakes are the ones that are going to be successful.
And I would totally agree with that. And that's probably a culture that also will allow for that blend of there's a problem and here's some solutions, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. All right, that covers us for exercise optimism. All right, next up, Jeff, we're in the home stretch.
These are my favorites.
The give yourself life pursuit. And first one is increase empathy. So increase empathy is defined as recognizing, connecting with, and appropriately responding to emotions. So you want to jump in on that one?
There are some easy definitions. One of them is the difference between empathy and sympathy.
Right.
Empathy is, like you said, putting yourself into that person's place, trying to understand where they're at, putting yourself with them. sympathy is just saying, well, I feel sorry. You're actually kind of putting yourself in a position, I'm glad it's not me.
Maybe more event-driven, meaning I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry that occurred.
And I've mentioned this one before, but there was a fantastic video from Brene Brown about sympathy and empathy, the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little cartoon.
Yeah.
But
we'll get that one in the show notes too.
Yeah. And it is the best definition, I think, of what we're talking about is this. I can't remember the different animals, but one of the animals is in a deep hole.
Yeah.
And one of the other animals just kind of pokes its head in the hole and says, I'm kind of feeling sorry. Do you want a sandwich? Yeah. I'll just remember that.
Yeah.
But then another one gets a ladder and climbs down into the hole with its friend.
Yeah.
And putting himself there. So I think that's the biggest thing with enhanced empathy is don't put yourself in a position of superiority.
Yeah, and I think that there's also, and this is one of the key elements when you get down in the hole with that friend or person, whoever they may be, whatever role they play in your life, and that is to listen.
Yeah, I meant to say.
That's okay. No, because I think that is one of the essential things. Yeah. And I think I can't fully empathize with your situation or your problem unless I fully understand what that is and why it is bothering you. Why is it disturbing you? Why is it making you sad? And I firmly believe that if you're extending that kind of overture to someone with that kind of an approach, they're going to appreciate that a lot more than, for example, oh, I had that happen to me 5 years ago. It's really terrible, but probably in a year you'll be okay.
A Me Too-ism.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I think that comes back to why we like judgment so much, because we like to be able to just hear quick. Oh, here's the answer. Here's my statement that will. It's almost like a faux empathy.
Yeah, we did an episode, I forget how long ago, about being an active listener. And that's what being truly empathetic is with someone, is to actively listen, which doesn't mean you're offering solutions.
Right.
You may ask questions.
Yep.
Explain, like you just said, explain to me why are you feeling this way? What,
yeah.
Not what can I do to help? Not that, but if there's a pause, maybe sometimes let it be a pause. All those things that go into being an active listener is the key, I think.
Yeah. I also believe, Jeff, and this is a warning for all of us, don't go there if you don't want to go there.
Yeah. I can remember when...
Should I unwrap that a little bit for the audience when I mean...
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Go ahead.
Because I if you truly do not, for whatever reason, and I'm not judging, if you feel like you're not capable of being an active listener, if you don't feel like you're capable of lending support.
And it might be what's going on in your life right now. You don't have the bandwidth.
You might not have the bandwidth. Yeah, for whatever reason. Please don't allow yourself to be either coerced or convinced that I should do this. I should say this. Because what I have found is that many people see right through that. And, they probably would say, hey, look, if you can't, then don't. It's okay. It's fine. If this doesn't fit your list of important things to do, important things to engage with, don't. It's fine. I think what happens, though, is that, and this is no insult to Brene Brown or Simon Sinek or anyone else, it's like we get these little antidotes from videos and talks or podcasts. And again, I'm not throwing stones. We live in a glass podcast house here.
Yes.
But my desire is not for you to just take one little snippet of what I said or you said, Jeff, and then you go out and you just apply it as if it was some kind of ointment, right? We want you to be fully engaged, but that does not mean we're telling you what to do.
It's funny, and this is one of those, today I realized how important the order of these competencies are. To be truly empathetic with someone, you need to start with the first one and work all the way through to see.
There's a flow.
There is a flow here.
Yeah.
To be able to, okay, I'm in a place where, yes, I can give myself to this person, or I can't right now.
Yeah.
And you go through that flow.
Yeah. So the other thing I would throw out, Jeff, I wanted to get your thoughts about the idea of self-empathy, because the competency as it is in our model and the definition does not necessarily, it's not a direct correlation for self-empathy. So I believe that we're supposed to appropriately respond to emotions in ourselves just like we are with others.
When I know what my experience has been, but when you've been doing a debrief with someone and you get to this competency, how many times, if you mention self-empathy, do you get wide eyes and I've never thought of that?
Yeah.
That's not what we're taught.
Yeah. And quite frankly, when you think about our condition specifically here in the United States, we're doing fabulous with technology, but we're doing terrible with human beings. And how, for the life of me, we seem to think that that's going to end up working. I mean, I guess if you buy into this fantasy that one day the machines will have it all controlled and the rest, but I think it's not going to be that clean. And I say that recognizing that has become a cultural norm. And I'm just saying, at the end of the day, we have made working on ourselves at best an afterthought. We've made that a low priority. And one of the previous episodes, I think you had mentioned about someone working all their life and then coming to retirement, and it's like there's all these problems. I don't know if you said it exactly like that, but I want to take it from that angle. Is that how is it that you will make the goals and objectives of a large, cold entity for 30 years? You give it all your energy, all your effort, and then you somehow think that when they say game over, I'll just flip a switch.
Can't do that.
You can't do that. And I think we get these messages, which are emotions, right? Appropriately responding. So when the message from my emotion is, it's not healthy doing that, it's not a good idea for your relationships to do that, I think that self-empathy kicks in to go, wait a minute, let me take a look at myself here. What am I doing? And you know what? Maybe I should sit down and talk with my family. Maybe I should go see a clinician about this, because I really don't know how to navigate out of being this workaholic or whatever the case may be. I think if you're not doing that, it's great that you might, for other people, be that source of encouragement, source of support. But I think you're leaving a lot on the table if you're not applying that to yourself too.
And I know you worked with some first responders. And did you see this in them, that they never took time to have empathy for themselves? They always concentrated on who they were serving?
It's interesting you asked that, Jeff, because, I found this particular group, and by no means, we're not, we don't work with 30 different, first responder groups, but this particular group that you're speaking of, they seem to have been somewhat aware that, I can't just leave myself in the dust as well, right? There was a great example of, I guess he was a lieutenant, and one of the crew members had gone on a run that went bad, and they call it a bad run in their world. And a bad run is typically, it's for someone potentially more often than not, they die. So it was as a kid. He was in his early 20s, and he he went through that process of blaming himself. And what if I had gotten there earlier? What if I had done this? Second guessing the whole 9 yards. And the lieutenant came to me after a session and said, hey, I just want to know what you think, because I want to help him understand that, I get how you feel. The bad runs are a part of this. And I mean, he really genuinely thought of it in terms of, again, that was obviously a situation of outward empathy, but he had a desire for that crew member to be able to see himself as, you did everything you could, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not okay that the person died. It's not okay that there was an emergency, but you can be okay with, you did all that you could. So from that perspective, yeah, I could see when your focus in your career or your work is on others, that you might find this one to be kind of a forgotten skill, right?
Right. You don't have the empathy for when you get tired.
Yeah.
Or when you get overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's face it, Jeff, it's another part of our culture. We want to always be in the group that gets it all right. Mm-hmm. That's always okay. Doesn't get tired, doesn't get worn out, even though the vast majority of every single person does.
There is one other aspect of empathy I think we need to pay attention to. If you have high empathy, I think sometimes that can get you into trouble because you won't confront a situation because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. Or say you're a manager, you have an employee that's a great person, not cut out for the job.
Yep.
But your empathy won't let you take that next step of, let's find some other job for you, or you're miserable, everybody around you's miserable, maybe you need to move on or something like that.
Do you think that, Jeff, is where you've kind of moved from empathy to another place? Because true empathy, I think, has a blend of accountability along with the feeling of, I understand where you're at. You've told me your story. I believe that is your situation. I believe, but in the end,
I think with what we're talking about, that empathy is overpowering these other competencies.
Okay.
It's not letting you look at consequential thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It's not letting you look at these other things that are there, and because it's overpowering them, it's keeping you from making the decision that is probably going to be better for everyone. Mm-hmm. It might be, and I am speaking from personal experience of someone that I had, loved the person, they were not cut out for the job.
Right.
And I made everybody miserable until it was pointed out to me of what I was doing. And then we found this person another place in the company that they thrived in. And if I wouldn't have had that pointed out, I probably would have lost some other employees.
Right.
Not that this person was doing anything bad, he just wasn't cut out for the job.
Well, when you think about the definition again, when it says that you are recognizing and connecting with and appropriately responding to emotions, again, if emotions are a message from you to you, then your emotions have probably pointed out, this is what you need. You need to pay attention to this. You need to have your radar on to this. Very important, but that's a good observation too. Mm-hmm. All right. So anything else on the empathy front? Okay, great. All right, Jeff, we got the last one.
This is my favorite one.
I could have guessed that. It's in the Give Yourself where we're at, life pursuit. It is pursue noble goals. Connecting your daily choices with your overarching sense of purpose. How about you start with that?
The first time I heard it, I thought, we talking about royalty?
Yeah.
No, it's not what it is.
Yeah.
What pursue noble goal is to me is, what is it that makes me who I am and what motivates me to do the things I think are important, the things that I have the ability to do in the world. And unlike a goal like, I want to be the president of the company, or I want to make $1 million or whatever.
Right.
Those are goals that you can, if you work hard enough, you can achieve those goals.
Yep.
A noble goal is not achievable because it's a part of everything you do every waking moment. So you're never going to achieve your noble goal because you're constantly working at it, because things come up in your life that this applies to. It could be as simple as if your noble goal is making people feel better about themselves. It could be honestly asking the person that's checking you out at the grocery store, how's your day going? And mean it. That could be part of your noble goal. Something as simple as that.
Yeah.
And it can go from there.
So I've used this illustration, and I can't do it because we're not on video, so I'm going to just describe it maybe to create a word picture for you in the audience. Is that if you imagine yourself, you're like on one end of a timeline, right? And you're walking in the direction of chronological, right? So we're talking chronos time, right? And as you're doing that walking, you encounter all the various problems and opportunities that life delivers. Expected, unexpected, happy, sad, fill in the blank. And there's kind of like two types of people. The ones with the noble goal look up, and they have kind of like a North Star. There's something that they have their focus on it's motivating them. It's something that they're pursuing, something that is daily in nature, right? It is always ever present in their mind. They're encountering all these problems and opportunities, but their navigation through and around and above and below them is much more efficient and has much better outcomes. Not because they're the most talented, not because they're the smartest, the richest, or whatever. It's because they have this thing that they've looked up, that star. That's where their mindset is. Their mindset isn't on, it's your fault, Jeff, that didn't work out. Their mindset is not on, well, if my mom and dad would have done this, or the government, they don't focus on that. And I'm not judging. I'm not saying that maybe it's true or not true. It's just that these people have looked high. They have something that's they're motivated by that's bigger. Maybe we'd even say that's living a transcendent life. And then there's the other type of people. They haven't developed that. They don't see that there is a North Star. They don't have a noble goal. So what they have is a horizontal life that's just encountering each problem and opportunity. No guarantees that this happens in every case, but those people often find themselves negative, pessimistic, anxious, angry. And I think there's a key. And again, this was a tool that I've used in session. I'm not, again, we don't tell you how to live your life here at Spirit of EQ. But what I found is that between the two, one has a much happier existence, a much more fulfilled life, maybe a better way to say it. They encountered the same problems and opportunities because if you live long enough, you're probably going to find people who have experienced what you've experienced. The death of a loved one, the divorce, the loss of a job, the starting of a new job, the moving from one geographic location to another. COVID, right? Whatever it may be. But it's interesting, the ones that have that North Star typically have a much more fulfilled life.
I like to, when I'm working with someone, I like to call it the movie of your life. So from today backwards, that movie script has already been written. You really can't change it. You don't want to dwell on it. It is. But from today forward, you get to write the script of that movie with the idea of, you can look at it, well, I'm just going to do it this way. What are people going to say about me at my funeral? Do they want to say he was the absolute best EQ assessor in the world? Or do they want to say, when I came to him with a problem, he actually listened to me and encouraged me? What do you want to be said then? And if you have a true North Star, if you have a true noble goal, that's what you're thinking. That I want to have an impact on people's lives that is meaningful.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up that the opportunity it's really a never too late thing.
Oh, no.
And quite frankly, I find it much more inspiring to hear the stories of those who maybe were sleepwalking and didn't have anything, any type of goal, to when they awoken, right? And they discovered that there was purpose and meaning.
I was sleepwalking until...
Well, I mean, yeah, we all, I think ultimately, again, the commonality, depending on, framework of time and location and all that. And I think that's really powerful. And from my understanding, Jeff, the noble goal is almost like the sort of the fuel for the other competencies.
Exactly. It's what drives them. I think that's, and this concept of a noble goal does not have to be very complicated. What I tell people is, you really want to come up with hopefully just one sentence to describe it.
Yeah.
But take your time getting to it. Some people, when this is mentioned to them, boom, they have it. I've had that happen in a debrief. Other people might take 6 months or a year, but they don't give up on it. They start with all these things that are important, and they just keep distilling it down until they come up with it. And when they can identify it, a lot of the things that they've been doing in their life now make sense. I was living this noble goal before. I didn't know it. Now that I know what it is, it's even more energized.
Yeah. And by the way, just from the perspective of giving encouragement to our audience, make sure that it's one that you can see. And what I mean by that is make sure it's authentically you.
Yes, this is not from anyone else.
Yeah. And again, we do seminars, workshops, one-on-one coaching, a whole gamut, right? It's not a show. There's no one's grading you. No one is assessing you to determine whether or not you pass or you fail. This is yours.
Yeah, there is no ranking of noble goals.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. All right, Jeff, we got it through them. I'm glad that we were able to do this. I'm hoping the audience is going to get a lot out of them. So as an audience, there will be one full episode around that you can just dig into the entire 8. And then we're also going to publish at some point to sort of the micro episodes as we take each of these individually. So until the next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone. This is Eric again. A couple of things as we've ended the show. We hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully you're tuning in on a regular basis. We'd love it if you would give us a great review on whatever platform you're listening to the podcast. It's so appreciative and helps us as we try to get more exposure for the work we do and the episodes that we publish. And we're grateful to you as a listener. The second thing is, just remember, our content is for educational purposes only. It's not intended by any stretch to diagnose or to treat anything that may be occurring in your life or anyone else's life that you may be connected to through the podcast. But once again, we appreciate you tuning in to the shows. And as always, we look forward to the next time that we're together. Take care.